Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And now, here are your hosts, Scott and Jesse from CompassKnox.com.
Hi, this is Jesse Mayshark with Compass. Just a quick note about this week's Compass Points podcast. We are taping it a little bit differently than usual because of some travel plans on our production team's behalf. And so you might notice the audio quality is not quite as good as usual, but hopefully that will not overly detract from your enjoyment. Hello and welcome back again to Compass Points, the weekly podcast where we talk about Knoxville news, government, politics, education, business, events, really anything that gets our attention. I'm Jesse Mayshark, co-founder and co-publisher of Compass, which you can find at CompassKnox.com. Joined as always by Scott Barker, also co-publisher and co-founder of Compass. How are you doing today, Scott?
Doing just fine, Jesse. Summer has started, not officially, but unofficially, and beautiful day today, which is Friday when we are taping this, and looking forward to getting out and enjoying it.
And as we noted up at the top, those of you who listen regularly will notice that our audio quality this week is not as good as it usually is because we are using Zoom to record rather than the plush state-of-the-art recording studios at Barbarian Productions like we usually do. This is because people are taking summer vacations and trips. This will probably happen a couple of times this summer. We will have various members of our operation joining from various places. So we apologize if the audio quality is a little bit fuzzy, but we will try to make up for it with worthwhile content, right?
Absolutely. The scintillating discussion is worth the burden of listening, to substandard. I say substandard only by Seth's high standards.
That's right.
Of audio. So.
All right. Well, we do have some things to talk about this week, some action at the school board on a couple of policies that we have talked about before, having to do with public forum and allowing private providers to provide therapy in district classrooms. Interesting report that came out about our development and building landscape here in Knox County, particularly when it comes to residential development, but commercial as well, and some related developments that were approved this week at Planning Commission. We'll be talking about that. Knox County Commission voted on Mayor Glenn Jacobs' proposed budget, including his last-minute deal with Sheriff Tom Spangler. So we'll talk about that. And to kick things off, Scott, among other things, June is a lot of things. As you note, it is the beginning of summer. It is also now the month when we have our most recently created federal and state holiday, Juneteenth, which will be coming up in not too long. And it is Pride Month, sort of the official, unofficial month when people across the country celebrate LGBTQ people and culture, and not just celebrate, but of course, Pride has always been sort of an assertion of Pride, as the name says, but basically saying, hey, we're here. We are people who live in your community, and we deserve respect and to be treated with dignity and so forth. And so somewhat coincidentally, at the beginning of this week, well, actually, it was at the very end of last week. I think this ruling actually came out after midnight on Friday, June 2nd, or going into Saturday, June 3rd. But there was a ruling that I think a lot of LGBTQ folks across the state and their allies were happy to see. Came from a district court that based in Shelby County, West Tennessee, but a federal court that found the drag bill that we have talked about extensively in the past, that our state legislature passed this spring, unconstitutional. Said that this bill, which has as its stated purpose to ensure that children are not present during inappropriate drag performances, the judge found that this bill was an unconstitutional infringement on First Amendment rights of performers and presenters. And the judge echoed a lot of points that people who were opposed to this bill and had litigated against it had raised, specifically that the state already has obscenity statutes. It is already illegal we already have legal definitions of obscenity in the state. Obscene speech is not protected by the Constitution under longstanding, Supreme Court precedent. But that this law did not sufficiently sort of differentiate between obscene speech and speech that may well not be legally obscene. And of course, obscenity has a legal test. It's a three-pronged test established by Supreme Court decision about 50 years ago. And among the elements of that test is, does the speech have any redeeming artistic or cultural value either to the audience? And basically, what this judge said, there was an LGBTQ theatrical troupe in Shelby County that writes and produces their own productions, and that does have some shows that are open to all ages, and those shows often include people in drag. And their argument was that, clearly we're an artistic, everything we do is an artistic production. We are exercising our freedom of expression, and that the law kind of served as a prior restraint. It was just one of the challenges with this law all along has been that it seemed to imply, if not quite explicitly say, that kind of any drag performance is obscene, just kind of male and female impersonators, as the law called them, by virtue of being male and female impersonators, make whatever speech they engage in somehow obscene. And this judge just said, no, that's not how that works. That's not what the definition of obscenity is. And also, the state already, if people are presenting obscene material to minors, the state already has an obscenity law that it can use to prevent that. Mm-hmm. And that the purpose of this law, the judge said, seemed to be much more to chill the speech, including legally protected First Amendment expressions of performers and presenters. So, Scott, maybe not a huge surprise. I feel like this was something that people, including us, you could go back to some earlier edition of this podcast where we talked about this and said, this law seems like it presents some First Amendment issues.
Yeah, I am no constitutional scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but this was pretty much a no-brainer.
Yeah.
The idea that just by virtue of wearing a particular garment, you are violating the law, that just is kind of strange, and runs counter to everything. I don't think that now. One thing is, I don't know how sincere maybe a lot of this was, because I think that I think that anybody who looked at that would see that it would not pass muster, but passing the law certainly scores points with the base and the political base of the Republican Party, and that is, and they can use the evil federal court system as a whipping boy on this. Of course, the judge in question was a Trump appointee. So.
Right. Yeah. This judge, I saw some people on social media saying, well, obviously this was an activist judge, and I don't even know what the actual definition of an activist judge is, but this judge was just appointed to the federal bench by former President Trump. So presumably a judge who had Republican conservative credentials, because that's mostly who President Trump appointed to the bench. Now, of course, because of the way the system works between the federal system and the state system, the only person, the named defendant in this lawsuit was the district attorney of Shelby County, who interestingly is a Democrat and said up front that he didn't want to enforce the law. But he was the person who they had to sue as the person who would be enforcing it. After the decision, he said he would be happy to continue not enforcing the law, basically. But so the judge, because he was the only named defendant, the judge could only enjoin him specifically. So what the judge's ruling said was that this law is unconstitutional, period. He didn't say this law is only unconstitutional in Shelby County, but the only jurisdiction immediately affected by the judge's injunction on enforcement is Shelby County. That led State Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, who says the state is planning to appeal this ruling, to come out and say, well, this only applies in Shelby County and the law is still in effect throughout the rest of the state, which is true on some level. But I think what we see in these kinds of cases often is when you have such a strong ruling. I mean, this wasn't like a close ruling. He was basically saying this is very clearly unconstitutional. That doesn't mean that nobody anywhere else in the state will try to enforce it. But it makes it unlikely, because you kind of know that even if you try to enforce this, somebody is immediately going to go to court and probably get you slapped with an injunction based on the ruling that we already have. So the most likely thing is that the law will kind of exist in some kind of abeyance until it is appealed to. It'll be appealed to the Sixth Circuit, and I'm sure we'll hear arguments there. It may be a case that could eventually go all the way to the Supreme Court. It really depends on how much of a real arguable issue judges further up the federal chain think there is here.
Yeah, the getting back to the enforcement thing, this kind of goes back to when you talk to law enforcement people. They don't really like laws like this. they want to, and that's not necessarily because they're all supportive of LGBTQ issues. It's that they want to fight real violent crime. They don't, drag show is, may or may not be their cup of tea, but they don't care because nobody's getting shot, nobody's getting stabbed, nobody's being robbed. Those are the kinds of crimes that they really want to focus on, and things like this. Because they do have discretion in many instances. So I doubt very seriously that even if this had not been struck down, that there would be a sudden spike in raids on events.
Yeah, definitely not in sort of our larger cities. You could sort of imagine maybe a prosecutor in a more or sheriff in a more rural county. Although those are also places where you're less likely to have
the drag show. Although you still can, it's just not as they're not held as frequently in rural counties as they are in urban.
And I do think that there, certainly an argument from those who oppose the law was that the intent of the law was more to scare people out of doing things in the first place, holding shows, holding all ages performances, etc., than to actually produce a whole lot of prosecution, that it was more about which was part of the judge's ruling, that the intent here seemed to be to chill speech. That's exactly what he said. Yeah. That's really what the impact of this is, to chill constitutionally protected speech. And that's why he said it was unconstitutional. So we will see, of course, what else happens with this. But in the meantime, for people who are having Pride celebrations, there's one scheduled for tomorrow, Saturday, on Sevier Avenue, Sono Pride, which will have public drag performances that children could be at. And they'll be able to do that without any fear of any kind of prosecution or whatever. Okay, let's talk about the county budget for a minute. And on last week's episode, we talked about the deal that was just announced last Friday between County Mayor Glenn Jacobs and Sheriff Tom Spangler, where basically Spangler had been seeking 30% raises for all of his officers up to the rank of captain, and Jacobs had said that that was not something the county could afford to do without raising taxes. And they came to an agreement that does not raise those salaries 30%, but gives Spangler a lot of what he was looking for. It increased pay for patrol officers up to the rank of captain by 12%, and for corrections officers in the jails by 27%. So he got almost the 30% for the corrections officers. And those are the jobs that are hardest to fill. Those are where the sheriff's office always has the most vacancies. It's hard to get people to work in the jails. They have a lot of turnover there. You know, a lot of what will pull people into those corrections positions is that is how you become. It's the most common way to become a sheriff's deputy, a patrol officer, is you work a couple years in the jail, and then you're eligible for an academy to then go on and become a patrol officer. But what they find often is that people don't make it those 2 years because, you know, it's not a super pleasant work environment.
No. In fact, you know, they're thinking, okay, I'm going into law enforcement, and they go and they work in the jail. And as Sheriff Spangler has pointed out, you know, jails have become Tennessee's de facto mental health care system, at least inpatient mental health care system. So a lot of, you know, it's not necessarily preventing bad guys from getting back out into the community, which it is still to a large degree, but it's also, you know, taking care of people with mental health issues. It is, and you've got aggression, you've got people who are schizophrenic, you've got all kinds of issues going on there, and it's you know, and these are people who want to, you know, as mentioned, you know, earlier, they're wanting to go out and eventually go out and actually fight crime, you know, and do those kinds of things. And if they are, and I don't want to say stuck in jail, but if that is where they are, and they don't see a way forward, or at least a way forward in a reasonable amount of time, you know, they may leave and take a job elsewhere, or try to get on with another law enforcement agency. And so yeah, it can be tough on people who go into corrections, and these are also really young people.
Yeah, often they are. And in fact, they just lowered the recruitment age for corrections officers to 18 this year. It was set at 19, but they're having so much trouble filling it that they went ahead and lowered it to 18 on the grounds that allows them to actually go and participate in sort of career days at high schools and things like that. And kids can theoretically go straight out of high school into corrections. You only need a high school diploma or equivalent. That's the only prerequisite. Yeah. And by raising these salaries now, the starting pay for corrections officers is going to be $50,000. And for patrol officers, because they went up less proportionally, it's $51,000. And the sheriff's office said that was very deliberate. They want to have sort of parity as much as possible between the corrections and the patrol officers so that people don't feel like they have to put in their 2 years in jail at a low pay before they can hope to move up. And, honestly, right, it's not a pleasant job probably in a lot of ways, but for an 18-year-old, for a 19-year-old with only a high school diploma, to now have the opportunity to go into a job where you're going to suddenly be making $50,000 a year, like that could obviously be attractive to people.
Absolutely. It would have been attractive to me when I was 18 years old to immediately begin making $50,000 a year. Of course, given the amount of time it's been since I was 18, inflation would have been about $20 a year or something like that. But no, it's you can certainly see where an 18-year-old, 19-year-old would be attractive to them. But, you've also got to kind of balance that in that these are 18 and 19-year-olds. They couldn't become post-certified officers, for example, until they're 21. You've got maturity level issues and things like that when you're dealing with a prison or a jail population, are vitally important.
Yep. Well, so the upshot of all of that was County Commission met on Monday and passed the budget unanimously with those changes and amendments, which also included some raises for other county staff. When Jacobs originally proposed his budget, it only included a 3% raise for general county employees. But after they announced this big jump for sheriff's officers, they very quickly heard from everybody else in the county and also from some county commissioners saying, well, we don't expect librarians or parks and rec employees to get 27% increases like the corrections officers are, but maybe a little bit more than 3%. Yeah. So they did move it up to 5%, which is right about at inflation for the past year. So they can legitimately say that all county employees got at least basically a real cost of living increase, except for teachers and school administrators, because that budget came separately through the school board. They are getting 4% raises. And one result of these changes is that now corrections officers with a high school diploma are going to start out making considerably more than school teachers with a bachelor's degree, or even school teachers with a master's degree, who are only sort of in the 45,000 or so, 46,000 range. And so that may be an issue that you will see come up now in future budgets, with people saying, shouldn't we be paying our teachers at least as much as we're paying our jailers?
Yeah, I anticipate that this will kind of, set a new bar for county employees in particular, as far as, the entry-level compensation. Certainly when, the city looked at that last year when they had their compensation study that, they looked at the various pay rates and ended up, some positions got substantial increases in pay because they were out of whack with what other cities were doing, and a little bit internally as well. And they adjusted the pay of police officers and firefighters, put them on a new step system where they get uniform increases year by year, which the city employees are getting other general government city employees are getting similar treatment as well. So that does have an effect. It's not just about the long term. It's not just about law enforcement salaries. It is about teacher salaries. It is about librarian salaries. It is about engineering department salaries. It is about public works employee salaries. So look for there to be a lot of pressure on increasing salaries in the next year or two. So
yep. We will see, but certainly the sheriff's office leading the way here. Okay, let's talk about this development report that came out, and this was done by the Knox County Planning Commission, looking at development trends in 2022. What did this report say?
Well, as you might imagine, we are in the middle of a large growth in the amount of investment in real estate, in development in Knoxville and Knox County. It's growing fast. And there are kind of two parts to this. There's this report that talks about that. And then there are also some things, the city and the county are having a hard time keeping up with it. So, they're taking steps to, make it a little faster to get plans approved and things like that to get housing in particular, more housing in the pipeline because that's the place where there is the most acute need. And we've talked about this, about how Knox County is going to need about 25,000 new, or the city of Knoxville alone needs about 25,000 new units. So we're to handle the anticipated growth in population. So this report looked primarily at last year, 2022, although it did look some historically. There was, $1.1 billion of investment in development projects in Knoxville and Knox County last year. A lot of it, in a decade ago, hardly any of it was in the city, or at least very little of that was in the city, and that's changed. City added more than 2,800 units in residential units last year. Now that's a lot of that. It's different from the county way in a way because the majority were in multifamily developments, apartment buildings for the most part. But there are also a lot of the city added 1,300. It was the county and the city of Farragut added more than 2,800 units. So that was those units. Every single one of them, as we rely a lot on reporting kind of on a daily basis on some of the trends on the Knoxville Area Association of Realtors, and because they have a monthly report that comes out, and as anybody knows who's been following this, as soon as you build it, they snap it up. It's very difficult to it's very rare to see a house on the market for longer than a week or so. I mean, it's just still insane, even though it's cooled down a little bit because of interest rates, but really not much. I mean, it's still higher than it was pre-pandemic. So it's
just because there's so much demand.
There's so much demand, and one of the sticking points is that it takes longer because there's so much demand. There's so many more development plans that have to go through the city and county offices, that there's a kind of a logjam there. And it's in the city in particular, because the city went for so many years with kind of a steady amount of development,
and really very, very minimal,
a steady level, low level of development. And then over the past decade, it's just, it's soared. It's soared countywide. I mean, in the past decade, the amount of development has more than doubled countywide. So it's, it's everywhere, but it's primarily felt in the city. Part of that is there's more commercial development. Part of it is there's more multifamily development. Part of it is that it's a lot of the development are smaller infill developments rather than new subdivisions. I'll get to this in just a second about why it might be a little bit easier, but the backlog in the city can be close to it's close to 60 days
just to get plans approved.
Now those include revisions. I mean, if you submit plans, it'll just be a few weeks. If everything's pristine and they don't ask you to make any changes, if they do, and this is one kind of complaint that a lot of developers have, is that the city's got so many, you got a lot more regulations than the county does, so there's almost always revisions that have to be made. You've got to jump through a lot more hoops in the city than you do in the county, and so the city or the county also has a backlog. It's a lot smaller. One of the reasons for that is the county, and it's kind of interesting, they have a lot of pre-approved site plans or building plans, so that if you're building a subdivision, not a high-end, architect, designed subdivision, but if you're just a upper middle class subdivision, there's almost no such thing as a middle class subdivision being built anymore, but something, a median income thing, there you can submit pre-approved plans,
sort of like off the shelf
stuff. The county's already approved it. Within a matter of a couple of days, you can break ground, and that's a far cry from what happens in the city. But then again, you can go out in the county and there might be a 120 unit subdivision goes in, and they're all they're all these off the shelf designs, whereas if a 120 unit subdivision in the city might have have to supply half a dozen different designs, and none of them have been pre-approved, so each of them needs to go through the approval process and maybe revisions to that. So it can last quite a while. Now, both the city and the county are hoping to be able to do things. Jim Snowden, the head of the Engineering Public Works Department in the county, has said, they're hoping to be able to add employees to break up the logjam they have. Although, like I said, it's not nearly as great as it is in the city, and he attributes a lot of it to where there just aren't enough building lots. In other words, people are not subdividing their land as quickly enough to get things on the market. In the city, it's going to be a lot more. They are also adding employees. They added one at the earlier in spring, so that got added in the current fiscal year. They're adding two more in the next fiscal year. They're hiring. They've hired a consultant to help. They've got a new computer permitting system that is supposed to be user friendly, and people can go in, developers can go in and use it, and on. The rollout has not gone well.
Yeah,
and then they are.
This, by the way, is a relatively common phenomenon. I don't know if people remember, but we had the county trustee's office just the other year transferred over to a new software system that created just months and months of problems and delays. Adopting new software systems, and this is not only true in the public sector. This is true in the private sector too. I've worked in newsrooms that have adopted new technologies or new software systems. Things always sound great when somebody is selling you a software system, yes. And then when it comes to actually adopting and integrating it, it's not uncommon for there to be problems.
Absolutely, and that's what's happened here. So they've got a consultant in to help with that. They also, in addition to hiring or creating the three new positions, in order to kind of try to catch up quickly, they have just issued and closed out the response time to request for qualifications for so they're wanting to contract out some of the plans review approval work to a private company just to kind of clear the decks, and so that contract will come up before City Council in the coming weeks or months. But they're hoping to be able to cut that delay down to where you can get approvals for in about 2 weeks rather than nearly a couple of months. So it's that would be a huge benefit for them. And one final thing is David Brace, who's the chief operating officer for the city, kind of oversees the permitting process for Knoxville. Has said that they're making some structural changes as well. One of the things they're doing is they're taking kind of the neighborhood codes enforcement, like the dirty lot ordinance, overgrown, where you have an overgrown lot or things like that. Those are currently handled by the plans review and inspections department, which also handles building codes and things like that.
All of the codes.
Well, they're moving it to public service because they're the ones who are kind of in charge of, they oversee the garbage and recycling contracts and other neighborhood beautification and maintenance issues. So they thought it was, and it used to be in that department.
Right. I was going to say, I think I mentioned this last week, but when I was working at the city, that change was made in the other direction. Those neighborhood codes were under public service. They got moved under the engineering department, sort of under the thinking that, well, it's everybody, these are all codes issues, and so it's better to have them all in one place. But obviously they have found that no, actually it's better to break them back out.
Yeah. And one of the problems that Brace pointed out is they have people who are supposed to be reviewing plans in the office who, because of the volume of stuff that's going on, are actually doing field inspections instead. So in order to catch up with field inspections, they're creating a bigger backlog in plans review because, you review the plans first, then they do the work, then then the city inspects the work. So, this contractor was supposed to be able to help kind of clear out that backlog so that things can move, faster in the future. We'll see. As with anything to do with, it seems with government, even clearing a backlog might take a little bit longer than you might think. But they say they're going to be working on it. This kind of relates into to some things that happened this month in the Planning Commission with current development things that are going on. One of the it was a little bit unusual at the Planning Commission meeting because there was kind of a spike in the number of projects that involve townhouses. And developers and builders have consistently said for the last couple of years that we can't build things fast enough. We have to and they and public elected officials have agreed that more density is better. Get more more units out there. We need more is better right now, and townhouses are a way to do that. Townhouses, especially, one of the Ben Mullins, who's an attorney who represents a lot of developers before Planning Commission, pointed out, most of the developable land in Knox County is developed. The flat stuff,
the easily
developable stuff. Because the roads go through, we've got ridges and valleys. The roads go through the valleys. The valleys are built out, essentially. You go, when you talk about Powell, you're talking about Emory Road back in either side of Powell. You're not really talking about there is a lot of development right around Powell itself, but it's really not restricted necessarily or confined, but predominantly along those valleys. And plus, when you couple that with the hillside protection measures that are in place, where you've got a hillside or a ridge, the steeper the land, the less you can disturb it, and they have formulas that they go by, as far as that, but basically it restricts the amount of land you can develop, and that's the land that's left. A lot of the land that's left has a small bit of flat land at the road frontage, and then it goes back up into kind of a hillside or a ridge that's more difficult. And what developers are having to do in order to create, to build enough units to make it financially feasible for them to do anything at all, they're having to increase the density in those flat spots. And an easy way to do it, it's not the only way to do it, an easy way to do it is with townhouses. And so that's what they're doing. They're the Planning Commission approved last Thursday 6 individual townhouse developments, nearly 400 units total, and that's just townhouses. And in fact, I think they probably approved as many townhouse developments as they did single family subdivisions that are out there. So it's becoming more prevalent. It's really, and one of the funny things is it's not getting, the fact that the townhouse developments isn't generating a lot of opposition from neighbors. It's any more so than a single family thing is. I mean, like there were 2 that were approved in Hardin Valley on Thursday. Same company, they're side by side. Both have that situation I was talking about where you have the hillside behind them that took up an extraordinary amount of the property. There's just a very small amount of property where they can develop it. And so the opposition there was quieter than a lot of opposition to developments in Hardin Valley. I don't know if that's because it's summer and a lot of people are out of town, but the objections were the same. They're, traffic and noise and, safety for people crossing the street and things like that. That is, those are common, but there isn't really a backlash about the fact that there are townhouses that are attached.
There's density.
Attached. Yeah.
Well, and townhouses kind of hit that a middle ground in terms of density and, aesthetics and economics and everything else between your single family, single house subdivisions and actual apartment complexes, which do, apartments for a bunch of reasons, including density, but also including some sort of like socioeconomic stereotyping and so forth. Apartments, just by the word apartments, tend to generate more concern, justified or not, from local residents than townhouses. I think townhouses sound a little more upscale, and also the density
more upscale.
Yeah, and economically they often tend to be right, and the density is greater than single dwelling subdivisions, but it's not as high as like an apartment building.
Yeah, so, and you're right. I mean, one of the cases they had at Planning Commission was a development on Valley View Drive, which is in North Knoxville, the Willow Springs area. It's a very long, narrow piece of property, wooded in the rear. It's not really a hillside protection area there. But initially, the developer was talking about putting in an apartment complex, and the area residents, which mostly single family houses, did not like it. They were opposed to the development. The developer changed his plans, and now he's going to put in 3 duplexes on the property, kind of in a row, since it is narrow. And the area residents were at the meeting anyway and said they were still opposed to it, but in their minds, they were still apartments, because it is an increase in density for that area. But again, originally the plan was for an apartment building, not townhouses, and so there was kind of there was concern from the get-go on whether that would affect property values and such,
right?
Which is a big concern. Single family neighborhoods about nearby apartment buildings.
Not one that is borne out by data. We should note there are studies of that, and it's very hard to say there's any negative impact on surrounding property values because of the presence of multifamily housing. There are other things that affect property values, people's perceptions of the area, median income, so on and so forth. But the mere presence of, there is a townhouse development down in South Knoxville, just outside the Island Home area. And Island Home is an area with fairly high property values. They've seen a lot of appreciation in the prices of those historic homes in the last couple of decades. Those townhouses that are down there, which are quite nice, by the way, have not had any effect. Prices in Island Home went up the same way they've gone up everywhere in recent years. The fact that there's this group of townhouses just outside the neighborhood did not have any impact on that at all.
No, and there are also apartments outside, right outside. Right. It's not. If the presence of apartment buildings suppressed property values, then it would be pretty cheap to buy land in Manhattan.
Right.
So it's not, it's not an automatic detriment to neighborhood property values. Anyway, so we're as always, we keep track of development trends and what's going on, and we'll keep an eye on that to see if this is a real trend or it's something that they just happen to have a cluster of them. Right. At this particular meeting, it's hard to say. You have to look back over time to see where things are going, and so we'll keep track of that as we go forward.
And I just think one thing to note there is that both the city and the county in different ways have been looking for ways to encourage denser development, including townhouses, including duplexes and triplexes and so forth, fourplexes, not just apartment buildings, as they can kind of fit in around existing neighborhoods and developed areas, because both the city and the county see a need to bring more units, but the best way to get more units is to have more density.
Yeah. And I know that we probably, taxed our listeners' patience, but one more little thing to that point. The city has been looking at what they call the missing middle housing, which is what you talk about: duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, smaller apartment buildings. They would have to change the zoning ordinances to fit those in, and they are behind the scenes looking at how they might be able to do that, which would encourage more of that a little bit higher density development in residential areas in ways that would not ideally take away from the character of the neighborhoods.
Right. Okay. School board met this week, had their monthly work session, and voting meeting, a couple of interesting things there. One was the issue of allowing private practitioners, private medical providers into classrooms to provide various kinds of therapy. We talked about this on the podcast a few weeks ago. We actually had an interview with some of the parents who've been involved in pushing for this. Specifically, it was a group of parents of autistic children who wanted to be able to receive a form of treatment called applied behavior analysis. And the way that you do that is you have a trained, certified behavior technician or therapist who actually comes into the classroom and works one-on-one with the student to try to keep them focused and on task and so forth. Knox County Schools had not been allowing that for various reasons. I think a lot of it had to do with just the idea of allowing outside parties into the classroom to provide services. The school system tends to like to provide services itself. That way they know who's doing it and what their qualifications are and so forth. But this group of parents were persuasive, and the school board basically drew up a new policy that will allow not only those behavior specialists to deal with children with autism, but a whole range, basically any kind of treatment or therapy that is prescribed by a doctor. You're going to have a doctor's note saying, yes, this student needs X hours per week of this kind of therapy. And the therapy that's being provided is going to have to not be disruptive, obviously, to the classrooms. The argument has really been that these therapists will be an assistance in the classroom, that having that one-on-one person working with a student who maybe has trouble staying focused and on task and typically requires a lot of redirection and attention from a teacher, having that specialist there will take some burden off the teacher. Ideally, that's how it would work. And so the board they not only passed the policy, but they passed it on first reading. Said like most policies have to be approved on 2 readings, 1 month and then the next month. This one, they went ahead and accelerated, which they can do with a 2/3 majority. And so it will go into effect basically immediately, which means that as everybody's planning for the coming school year, which will start in August, I know it feels like we just started summer, but actually summer's pretty short for students here in Knox County. And
especially the 3rd graders.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Which is a different story altogether.
Those ones who are still in the summer camps right now. But yeah, so the parents were very happy about this. Several of the parents who'd been leading this effort came to the school board and said, thank you. And basically everybody's happy. So that was the follow-up on that issue. The board also debated whether to change the way that they run public forum. And of course, public forum is something that all of our local governmental bodies have. And under a new state law, it's something that every local governmental body in the state is going to have. That doesn't really have a lot of impact here because the school board, city council, and county commission already have regular public forums. But there are other places in the state that and the state didn't require them until now. And so it was really up to local county commissions, school boards, et cetera, whether they wanted to have public forum. New state law says, yes, you do. If you're having any kind of a voting meeting where you're taking action or debating action, you do have to allow public forum. And so the school board had to slightly tweak their existing public forum policy just to reflect that new state law. While they were in there, while they had the hood open, they kind of poked around at the rest of the policy. And a specific thing that they were looking at was whether to limit when and how people can sign up to speak at public forum. Right now, you can either call ahead, you can call the school board office, and this is also true with county commission and city council. You can call ahead up to a day before the meeting and sign up to speak, or you can come to the meeting and just walk up to the table before the meeting starts and sign up there. And again, this is something that also city council and county commission allow. However, the school board has had some security concerns arise in recent months because they're in a new boardroom now in the Summer Place complex down there. And it's kind of an oddly shaped room. It was not, I think, really probably designed to be a big meeting room. It's a little bit long and narrow. And so the school board is at a sort of narrow horseshoe-shaped table there. And what has happened in some meetings where there's been big turnout because there are controversial issues or issues that a lot of people want to speak about, there's been kind of a log jam there at the table, people coming in and all kind of clustering around the school board table, a lot of them signing up to speak, some of them maybe just saying hi to board members or introducing themselves. And this led the school security folks to kind of feel like, it's a little bit crowded in there. If somebody got really mad or something, if there was an incident, like it could be sort of tricky there just because of the way the space is laid out. So the board was looking at possibly only allowing people to call ahead and sign up, not allowing them to come the day of and sign up. And there was some pushback on that, with several board members saying, it's hard enough for people to know what's going to be on a school board agenda and be aware of it in enough time to show up at a meeting to talk about it. If you push that back a few days, which it would be the day before, but it would be the business day before. The school board has its monthly work sessions on the first Monday of every month, which means you would have to sign up by the Friday afternoon before. So really 3 days in advance. And a lot of times the agenda for that meeting doesn't come out till that Thursday. Right. So you only have like a day for the agenda to be put out there and somehow for people to hear about it, find out what's on it, either by reading Compass or, following social media or whatever. And it's just not that much time. And that's what several board members said, is it was just too restrictive. Reverend John Butler, who's the first district representative on the school board, who often spoke to the board as a community advocate before he was elected to it, he said that often he had to come and sign up the day of the meeting because he would hear about something like over the weekend from people and get there on Monday. And, also I think there's some concern that if you have people who feel strongly enough about something to want to come to a school board meeting, which is, entails a fair amount of work and effort in and of itself, you don't want that person to then get there. And a lot of times this might be somebody who is concerned about something, maybe angry about something, go to all the trouble to get there and then find out, you're not even going to be allowed to speak. That's not going to make anybody feel better. And so basically they took out that change. They sent that whole issue back to their policy review committee to think about it some more. And they also said maybe they'll think about, rather than restricting it that way, maybe there's a way to handle the security issue some other way. They could put the sign-up table out in the lobby or in an adjacent room or something, just so you get away from that fear of, this huge crowd of people there before the meetings, which, I agree, because I've been there and seen this happen. Like it can get pretty crowded there pretty easily just because of the nature of the space.
Well, managing this has been an issue in local government for a while. The Planning Commission, since I was just at the Planning Commission last week, has an interesting thing. Of course, they have people can submit, once they see what is on the agenda, or they find out because there are signs out in front of properties that are getting rezoned or whatever, find out, that something's going on in their neighborhood or whatever. They can submit comments online. They can call ahead or email ahead to try to get on the speaking list. But they also have the ability to sign in day of the meeting. Now, you can sign in with people there, but they actually have a signing list on the podium where if you had, not signed in to speak, yet you are you don't want that subdivision to go on the farm next to your subdivision, you can go up when they ask if there's any opposition. You're there, and you can go up and just sign in before you start speaking.
Right,
and it's way far away from the if you're well aware, well familiar with the main assembly room, the city county building. The podium is nowhere close to the rest of the commissioners who are up on the dais. So that might be something they do, but it is a very difficult thing to kind of manage. I know even when you have rules in place, one of the rules City Council has on their public forums is if there's opposition to a proposal, or if there's support for a proposal, they limit it to 3 speakers each side, and the 3 speakers get 5 minutes. So theoretically, it's 15 minutes each side. So for any issue, but if there are more than 3 speakers, they invariably suspend the rules. And, a lot of times they'll shorten the amount of time you get to 3 minutes, but invariably they suspend the rules and allow anybody who shows up to pretty much to speak. And so it's not. It's a tough situation to manage because no elected official wants to be seen as stifling, public opinion.
Right.
It just doesn't. They know it's a bad look. They know it's a bad look, and so the people who want to speak at public forums actually have kind of the upper hand in that because officials don't want to look like they are contemptuous of the people.
Yeah, and I do think that, just from a basic sort of civic engagement standpoint, it is nice, I guess, that people who do take the actual time and trouble to come to a public meeting, which, as we know, is a very small minority of people who actually do that. If somebody has gone to all that trouble, it's kind of nice for them to be able to actually stand up and say their piece, because it takes a lot.
Yeah, it does. I mean, in fact, it takes so much that Knox County has close to 500,000 people, and if 20 people show up at a public meeting to complain about something, it's a groundswell of opposition.
Right. Yeah.
Because, normally nobody shows up, or very few, 1 or 2 people show up, and not 20 or 25. And that seems like, like I said, this huge movement, when it's really only 25 or 30 people out of 500,000.
Yep. All right. Well, now we are to the Q&A part of our podcast. Every week, or most weeks when we remember to, we go on our subscriber-only Facebook page, the Compass Colloquy, and we just ask our readers if there are any particular issues they want to hear about beyond the big headlines. And we got a couple questions this week. One that I thought we could address. Somebody said, hey, remember that children's museum that was supposed to be built on the site of the city's old public safety building, police headquarters? What's going on with that? So, Scott, what's going on with that?
Well, about the same thing's been going on with it for the last couple of years. Nothing right now. Those of you, you may recall, who were following it, may recall this was kind of one of those weird 3-way deals that the city got. The city was able to get the St. Mary's site in North Knoxville for $1 for their new public safety complex, which is nearing completion now.
The road signs have gone up. I just noticed that on Oglewood Avenue, there's now a sign pointing you to the public safety complex.
The Tenova Healthcare, which owned the hospital, got basically the promised tax incentives for new medical facilities on Middlebrook Pike in West Knoxville, which they were already going to build. But they got some incentives to do that, to make it more appealing to go ahead and do that. And then the Clayton Family Foundation, Jim Clayton, the founder of Clayton Homes, it's his charitable organization. They took over the safety building site, which is, for those who are not initiated, that means you haven't gone to city court to fight a traffic ticket, is the land that is just to the east, right next to the Civic Auditorium.
Up the hill from the Civic Auditorium.
Yeah, it's kind of up the hill. There's a white building at the far end of a broad expanse of a parking lot. That's actually our police headquarters and the municipal court. Anyway, that property is actually already owned by by the Clayton Foundation. They lease it back to the city, I believe, for $1 a year, half for a couple of years. But this all came out pre-pandemic. Mm-hmm. This was the plan pre-pandemic,
and the idea was to build this state-of-the-art science museum there.
Yes, yeah. It was going to be a state-of-the-art science museum. Lots of interactive exhibits. They had trotted out some examples of design. They were getting some of the exhibits designed behind the scenes. They were kind of moving forward. A lot of these firms that they were using from New York. That's where the firms are that design museum exhibits, because there are firms that just design museum exhibits. Anyway, so that was all going great, guys. Then then COVID-19 hit, had the pandemic. Tenova went ahead with their stuff. The city went ahead building the safety center, new public safety center. The museum got put on hold, and one of the things was, and you may recall, if you think back to especially the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about how COVID-19 might change public spaces. And so there was a lot of, anywhere there's the architects talked about this quite a bit. And so there was some uncertainty about what museums would look like, what exhibits would be like, how, and this was supposed to be interactive. So you bring in a lot of people into small spaces, or at least concentrated spaces. And, how will that look? So that kind of went on hold during the pandemic. And then as we've come, I won't say out of the pandemic, but pretty much.
The federal government lifted its declaration of emergency. So I feel like we're sort of like as out of the pandemic as we're going to get.
Yeah. So I'm always hesitant to say we're out of the pandemic, because the second that I say that, we're going to have a surge that that is unlike any that we've seen before. But that's more superstition than science. So I need to get over that. Anyway, and since then, I think that I've been checking with the city every couple of months. I'll ask somebody who would know, what's up with the science museum, what's going on, and the answer is invariably the same. Mr. Clayton, Jim Clayton is still planning to do it. But we don't know what his timetable is yet. Or we talked to him just recently. He's still planning to do it, and so
and they have to get out of the police headquarters before anything physical can happen.
There was talk of the possibility that, depending on the side of the museum building itself on the property, that they could build that while the police department and municipal court were still in the safety building. I don't know how realistic those talks were, because whatever it would be disturbing a large amount of the property between the civic auditorium and the safety building into the parking lot that is used for the safety building. So what they ended up doing, obviously, is just waiting. The Knoxville Police Department is currently moving into the new public safety center in North Knoxville. It should be complete fairly soon, but they are literally in the middle of moving, boxes and things like that right now, and that's kind of a tricky logistical thing, because, as everybody knows, police departments work 24/7. There's there can't be a drop off in operations, so that there has to be a way that they can move offices from one spot to another. For instance, the homicide detectives have to, when they move, they can't really take a day or two off to move everything at once. They have to do it in a way that doesn't disrupt the investigation. So anyway, that's going on now. That should be completed. It'll be this summer. Should be any time. I haven't checked on the exact date. They thought they would be able to get it done by the end of May. Initially, that's been a long time ago. Obviously, it's going to be into June, but probably by the end of the month, it'll definitely be out. I don't know if municipal court will be fully moved, but it will be this summer. The site will be vacant, and the Clayton Family Foundation can do with it what they will. And we'll find out. Obviously, we'll continue to try to get updates, and moving forward as far as the what the timeline might be.
Right. Short answer is it is still planned, but there's nothing new to report on it.
Right. Yeah. I just spent about 20 minutes telling you that there's nothing new going on.
Yeah, but it is still planned. That is still the idea. Okay, well, let's look ahead to this coming week. Not a huge amount on the civic calendar, but there is a city council meeting on Tuesday.
Yes, city council is meeting Tuesday. It's their, they've already they're through the budget, all that. So it's kind of a quieter type of meeting. There aren't, at this point anyway, the agenda does not look to be particularly controversial, but one of the things is they're still doling out a little bit of pandemic relief money. They'll be doing that. They've got $25,000 that they're going to be contract with the Interfaith Health Center, $33,000 to the
I'm having trouble reading your own.
I can't read my notes, but they're
a perennial challenge for journalists.
The big one's $1.3 million to this the CAC for transportation stuff. The one interesting thing, this goes back to development. This is our I guess the development issue or edition of the podcast. The city of Knoxville. This is one of those regulations that developers hate. City of Knoxville has what's called a 50% rule, where you go in and you renovate property, and improve property. If you if you improve it, and the investment is more than 50% of the property's value, then you have to comply with more recently passed off-street parking regulations. And older properties don't comply. So if you really renovate an older property, you're going to have to make and by these new regulations have to do with the number of lots, have to do with buffers, all kinds of things that cost money to be able to do. And what they found is that's kind of had a little bit of a chilling effect on the redevelopment of lower income properties because it's tough to renovate. It's expensive to renovate, period. It's tougher to do that in either lower income houses or businesses because the margins are a lot thinner. And then when you put on top of that, you're going to have to completely redo the parking lot and reconfigure the parking lot somehow. And there might not be a real way to do it at all to comply with the law. That is just a little too. That might be a little too much. So they might,
disincentive to take on
disincentive, especially in low income areas. That's the one emphasis that they're making on this. So basically, what they're going to be doing is doing away with the 50% rule. So that you won't have to comply with that. We'll see. I haven't talked to any I haven't talked to any city council members. Don't know how they feel about that. I have talked to developers about it. They are really happy that it's going away, or it could go away. And so, we'll see how that goes. It was, I talked to a developer recently, and it was, when I asked about, city regulations, that was example number one, that this developer threw out there. And I was not asking about affordability, but was entertained with a long discussion about affordability, and that was one of the keystones of that conversation. So anyway, so that's going to be on the agenda. There will be a Knoxville Utilities Board meeting next week as well. The agenda has not been released yet, so don't know. They passed their budget, another $1 billion budget last month, so they'll probably be tidying up the finances at the end of the fiscal year and getting ready to move into the next fiscal year. They may probably will talk a little bit about the fiber build out, which is ongoing. So and we'll check in and see what's going on with them as well.
All right. Well, we will be back next week to talk about those things and anything else that happens between now and then, and hopefully in higher audio fidelity than we're able to this week. But as always, thanks to our remote producer, Seth Barber with Barbarian Productions, for hanging with us this week.
And that has to do with his location, not his personality. He's engaging. He's not a
Seth is guy. Not a remote guy. You're right. He's are you an extrovert, Seth? Is that what you would say? Our theme music. Yeah.
I would tend to say no, but I think as I'm growing older, I'm getting that way. I'm turning into the old man who'll ask anybody any question anytime.
Well, that's called getting cranky.
Well, we appreciate you either way, and thanks to Will Wright, who wrote our theme music, and we will see y'all back here next week.
Welcome to Compass Points, the weekly podcast for CompassKnox.com. CompassKnox.com is your best source for news and politics in Knoxville and Knox County. Your hosts today are Scott Barker and Jesse Mayshark, the founders of CompassKnox.com. You can find their daily in-depth coverage and subscribe at CompassKnox.com. The Compass Point podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Almost an Agreement. Almost an Agreement is a layman's attempt to get a handle on the workings in government and politics that we deal with every day. Check them out at almostanagreement.com or subscribe for free on your favorite podcast provider. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed on today's podcast, go to CompassKnox.com and subscribe for in-depth coverage and much more. And many thanks to William Wright for composing our theme song. Compass Points is a partnership of Barking Shark Media and Barbarian Productions, and recorded by Lord Seth A. Barber at Barbarian Studios, Knoxville, Tennessee.